Is it 11? Yes, it is. Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Mann, and welcome to Festivals and Events Ontario first ever FEO 21 Virtual Summit and our first Tuesday talks for 2021. I'm so glad you joined us. And as I said earlier, I am Debbie Mann from Festivals and Events Ontario and your host for this particular session. And we have
Jay Nyhouse from Festivals and Events Ontario, the Marketing and Communications Director.
Thanks, Jay. And we're excited to be here with you. Sorry, I'm reading a script and I'm not used to this. So I just got to tell you. Sorry. So our lineup is really great for the month of February. And Stephen is going to be kicking our Tuesday talks and our conference off. So Stephen Murdoch, thank you from Enterprise Canada. So excited to have you back. You've been with us on and off for the last 16 years. So glad that you were able to help us out this year.
Excited to be here, Debbie. Thank you very much for having me. To the what looks like already 80 participants, thank you for joining this morning. Excited to be here. I appreciate it. I know everybody's busy. I'm sure most of the folks are working from home. Interesting time for all of us, no doubt, myself included. I'm sequestered in my basement in St. Catharines, Ontario. So it's a fun time, needless to say, and like many, have two kids running above me, trying to learn. So it makes for fun times to say the least. Today we're going to be talking about improving relationships with the local media in your community. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart, media relations. Before we started the conversation, actually, Jay was saying to me that he's a former member of the media himself, and I'm sure most of the participants, if not all, have been dealing with the media on a regular basis. I'll talk a little bit about our experience first and a little bit about me before we get into the presentation. So first and foremost, a little bit about me. My name is Stephen Murdoch. I am the Vice President of Public Relations for Enterprise. I talk a lot about media relations on my Twitter handle. You can find me at Canadian PR Guy. I've had the pleasure, I was talking earlier, of being with the firm for 18 years in August. It goes quite quickly. Had the pleasure of dealing with clients from coast to coast. We actually do a lot of work in the tourism practice. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the event and festival space. So just a little bit of a heads on that. I thought I'd start by telling you, it's always nice when you have somebody to learn a little bit more about what their background is and exactly what they do. So as I said, I'm with Enterprise. We are a 4-office firm. We've got offices in Toronto, just across from the Eaton Centre, for friends that might be joining us from Toronto. We've got an office in downtown Hamilton, an office in Ottawa, and an office in Edmonton. So we are a full-service public relations and government relations agency. We've been working a ton in the tourism and event space, helping groups tell their stories and speak to government, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. As I said, let's make this as conversational as possible. So if at any time, please don't hesitate to ask a question. I think it's always best to talk about those at the very beginning, and we can go from there. So as you can see from this slide, we do a little bit of everything. We've now grown. We're at 40 plus strategists and consultants. And so very fortunate and blessed to be working with Enterprise. A little bit about us. We do a lot of work in the festival and event space. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the clients that we've worked with in your space. We continue and are the agency of record for the auto show, and I'll talk a little bit about that in detail later on. We've had the pleasure of working with Canada Blooms, Grace Jerkfest, which actually I made the connection through Festivals and Events Ontario with Anthony, who's a wonderful human. Toronto's Festival of Beer, the Gourmet Food and Wine Expo, and the list goes on and on and on. So we're very fortunate. And the reason I put these slides up, because sometimes when you get a guest speaker, you're often wondering, does she or he actually understand our sector and do they work in it? So I do want to let you know that. We also do a lot of work in the tourism space. This is just a quick snapshot. As you folks know, FEO is based in the Waterloo region. We do a lot of work in the KW area. We've done a lot of work over the years with Mark Bingaman and Bingaman's Amusement Parks, with Minto over at Explore Waterloo, and obviously, as I said, I put my head down in Niagara, so we do a lot of work in the Niagara sector. I did want to say, now that we're talking a little bit about tourism, our firm has actually been entrenched with the government, and actually we're hired by them to help put together their latest paper called Reconnecting Ontarians. Now, if I should say, if one of the key things that you take away from this talk is to read that, really Google it. It's called Reconnecting Ontarians. If anybody has any issues, you can certainly email me. You can find me on our website, but I would encourage folks to read that. We were hired by the government to figure out what tourism and the event and festival space is going to look like post-pandemic. And I think the biggest issue, and I know the folks from talking to clients that work in your space, is the fear that when this pandemic is over, are people going to want to move around? Are people going to want to, as I call it, leave the door? That's the challenge. When I talk to our clients and I talk to my colleagues, I say the event and festival space, it all starts with leaving the door. I'm not painting a dire picture for many of you when I say the numbers in terms of folks that are willing to move around in January and February have been low. There's a low desire for people to want to leave their community. There's a very low desire for people wanting to get on a plane, even when the pandemic is over. So you as a event and a festival, how is it you can remain relevant? Now, I can appreciate the folks on this call. I'm sure we have everything from big festivals and events that have full-time staff to family-run festivals and events. So today what we want to talk a lot about is the media and how you can work with the media in your community to actually get out there and tell your story. So I always like to start presentations by talking about what's happening in the present media landscape. To use the word decimated would be an understatement. I call St. Catharines home. And in my community, when I first started in public relations 23 years ago, my local paper had almost 15 reporters. I believe they're down to 4 now. So you have 4 reporters who are covering the same amount of stories, and they continue to be decimated. I'm sure folks on the call heard about CGAD in Montreal yesterday, who unfortunately let several people go on air and behind the scenes. So it's important to keep that in mind before we start to talk about media relations, is to understand what these folks are up against. Journalists are, as I call them, society's watchdogs. They are under a ton of pressure on a day-to-day basis. They're not, in my opinion, paid well for the work that they do, which is very strenuous and can be very grueling. So keep that in mind, how important as you create relationships with the media in your community. I will also say, before we get into it, really start to create relationships with media outside of your community. And why I say that is, where I live in Niagara, a lot of people, they consume the local newspapers and the radio and CHCH TV, but they also consume Toronto media. So I always tell clients, even though you are at a potentially, let's say, a Niagara event, you should actually be talking to the Toronto media, because people in Niagara consume Toronto media. So keep that in mind when you're going out there to tell your story. So media relations, while it's fundamentally changed, the importance of media relations is not. Full disclosure, I know when influencers came out, we have a full social digital department whose some folks, my colleagues, their full-time job are to deal with influencers. We have some big brands that we work with and some smaller brands where we work with top tier influencers, B influencers, and I'll be the first to admit, when this started to happen, I said, what does this mean for the media landscape? If anything, it's actually added another audience for you folks to talk to. I don't know, we'll talk a little bit about influencers later, but it's something you should get your head wrapped around, especially people in your community who can help tell your narrative. So as a landscape shifts, one thing remains the same, and that's the news cycle. People are voracious. Content. I always laugh when people say, we don't need the media. Well, I'll tell you a pretty startling fact. If you were to take off news off of an aggregate like Twitter, I would say 80 to 85% of the content on Twitter actually starts from a media outlet. So it either starts from a TV station like CP24 or a Globe and Mail or a radio station. A lot of the content that we're consuming is coming from somewhere, and that's coming from media. And I think what's been interesting in the middle of a pandemic is how a much more importance that media has played. What we've seen with what has transpired south of the border, that people were turning to the news because, nobody wants to be getting the news just from Twitter. I'm the same. I don't believe anything until I actually read it in a newspaper or hear it on the radio or see it on TV. So keep that in mind. Media relations really comes down to one thing: audience. And I think we all know that. I think one of the biggest challenges clients of our agency sometimes have is figuring out who is their audience and how do we reach them. So who do we want to speak to and how do we speak to them? As you can appreciate, not everybody has the same audience. Most of the work that we do in festivals and events and the tourism practice, as you can appreciate, we spend a lot of time building the credibility and the awareness of the show within a 3-hour catchment area. So if we're in Niagara, we're looking across the border post-pandemic. We're looking into Buffalo, Rochester, Cleveland. We're looking up past north of Toronto. So we're keeping all that in mind. If you're a bigger festival, you should really be looking for wins south of the border. I know when the border opens up, Americans are going to be hungry to want to come to Canada. We've been hearing that Americans have a higher propensity to want to travel and move around than Canadians do. So keep that in mind, that there are ample opportunities to tell your story. One of the examples I use, we've had the pleasure of working with Steam Whistle Brewing. It's that out-of-the-box creativity, which I'll talk about later. We've had the pleasure of working with Steam Whistle Brewing for several years, and we've had a lot of success building their brand south of the border. And people say, why are you doing that? Steam Whistle doesn't sell their beer they don't sell their beer in the US. I said, well, the play for us is that Americans are coming up. So we've put together, interesting media relations campaigns where you will look at the Blue Jays schedule and we'll look at the teams that's visiting. So if Cleveland's coming in town or Boston or the Yankees, we can get a list of media that might be traveling with the team and start to tell those stories. We know travel media are going to be focusing a lot of their efforts on festivals and events. So keep that in mind as you're going out there and telling your story, that it's not just in your community. There are other people you can be speaking to. Just wanted to provide some quick case studies. We've been with the Canadian Auto Show. I wish I could see a show of hands, but literally one of the clients I really enjoy working with, a great group internally, have a wonderful story to tell. We were hired back in 2016 to build a more broad audience for Canada's largest consumer show. Now, if you're an automotive writer, the reality is you're covering the auto show. There's no question about it. You know who the auto show is, you know what they do. We were actually brought in to look at the development and distribution of different story angles. So it's that lens of coming in and saying, you know what, we're not just a show festival. So we put together ideas that you would be like, I didn't actually think of that for my festival or event. We put together a mommy blogger piece where we brought in an expert to show you how to put your child in the car seat correctly. And, those kind of things where we're actually thinking outside the box, going after the lifestyle, going after the business, telling the business side of the auto show. And ultimately that led to, over 1,300 journalists coming into the show. And the play for us and the play for the client was to be able to get out of that automotive sector and be able to tell the stories that went beyond that. Just one other quick case study is Canada Blooms. Canada Blooms is a wonderful show. It's based out of Toronto for those folks that haven't been. It's all about thinking outside the box, as we say. The garden writers, when we started working with Canada Blooms over 10 years ago, the garden writers were obviously quite familiar with Canada Blooms, but where we were brought in is to say, okay, let's dissect the festival, the show, and figure out how do we get media exposure throughout the, let's say, 7-8 days of a festival. I don't need to tell the folks on this Zoom call. The challenge with most people is with most festivals is you're going to get that media coverage as we call it, at, and post. So a lot of the festivals and events across Ontario have pre-publicity. So, our festival's coming in Cambridge, or this is happening in Gananoque. So, but the biggest challenge for an organization is to keep that media coverage going and have folks talking about your festival event throughout throughout the festival. So that's where it's always good to bring in another set of eyes and figure out, okay, what is it we're doing? We've created what we call a newsroom mentality at some of these shows. So what we do is we send our staff there, our team, and we go there a day or two before, talk to the exhibitors, talk to the sponsors, talk to show management, and figure out exactly what it is, what narrative they want to share, and what messaging. So what we then do is we set up computers and create that newsroom where we're constantly just pumping out content. Now I can appreciate for a lot of people who are hearing us are saying, I don't have the budgets for that. I can't do that. I'm busy running an event, and I can appreciate that. But I'll tell you, in my other hat, I'm actually a teacher. I teach at Niagara College in the postgraduate public relations program in Welland, and I can tell you, there are a lot of hardworking students in every community who are looking to build their portfolios. Keep that in mind. If you don't have a PR student doing an internship or working with you, I think you'd be sorely missed. I think it's a great opportunity for you to get out there and have somebody helping you at a cost-effective manner to kind of figure out those stories and build your profile as you move forward. So what is media pitching? I'm sure a lot of folks on this Zoom call have actually done media pitching. I'm sure to most it's not a surprise. It's really just engaging targeting media with a pitch letter or a media release. We have a lot of success with what we call media pitches. It's been interesting to see this from a PR perspective. Is so many. When I first started in PR, there were so many folks that it had to be a dedicated media release. What's happening now is just quick media pitches. So what a media pitch is, for those who don't know really quickly, is it's just a simple paragraph or two offering somebody to talk to something in the news cycle. We do a lot of work with Paramount Fine Foods and the CEO, Mohammed Fakai, who's a wonderful human, and I'm sure you've seen the coverage in terms of what he's doing. Mohammed and I are constantly talking, and I'm looking for opportunities to insert Mohammed into the news cycle. So anytime they're talking about homelessness, you've probably seen a lot of the work that Mohammed's been doing lately. We offer up Mohammed to speak to CP24. It's a quick paragraph. These people in the newsrooms are desperately looking for people to talk, and as you can imagine, in the middle of a pandemic, it can be more difficult to actually speak to people. So keep that in mind. A quick media pitch can do a ton in terms of you getting out there and doing that. Is there any questions at this time? I'm happy to take any questions before we go any further. Jay, do we have any questions so far?
We have a lot of people excited to be here and saying that they're present, but we don't have any questions just yet.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited everybody's here. So keep that in mind as you're doing media pitching. It all starts with a good media list. Now, I can appreciate in your community, if you're in a smaller community, you should have those relationships with the news media, and I'm sure you do. But what I want you to take away from today is that you shouldn't be talking to the media just 2 months, maybe a week before your festival event. You should really be inserting yourself into the discussion. Another colleague who might be on this call, Mark Bingaman. Mark's really good and has done a really good job in Kitchener-Waterloo, positioning himself as an expert and on the tourism industry. And you'll hear Mark out there talking about what's happening and his thoughts on where the industry is headed. And I think it's so important because we are going to come out of this. We all know that, but I think it's so important for the media to know that, you guys haven't shuttered and that you're here and you want to talk to the media. So keep that in mind. So again, start with a target media list, build a quick media list. If you don't have a media list, I would encourage you again to hire somebody to help you with that list. That list is golden. Unfortunately, as you can appreciate with media cuts, the media is constantly changing. So it's so important to have the right media contacts for a number of reasons. You want to make sure that the information is getting into the right hands, and you also want to make sure you're not pissing off a reporter, to put it bluntly. There's nothing worse than a reporter getting information on something that they're not interested in, and that could kill your credibility. Again, it's as simple as offering clients up. We've noticed some tips to help you folks that we've had really good success with in media pitching. Is we cut and paste a pitch into these for some, these are going to sound very basic, but it's very simple. Don't attach it as a PDF. A lot of the time journalists have told me once they see an attachment, they won't open it. So cut and paste it into your body. A little secret that's worked well for us on the media relations side is we create tweets for the journalists. So if there's something happening with at a festival event, we'll create 3 or 4 tweets that a reporter can literally just cut and paste the tweet or the Facebook update and for the outlet and run with it. And a lot of reporters are so appreciative of that, and how, in terms of how you package a story. You have imagery, you have photos, you have B-roll video. It can be from last year's festival, it doesn't matter. Keep all that in mind, and then creating social content that a journalist who is working at the end of their desk, frantically running around for the day, they can quickly cut and paste those social media updates and put them on the Facebook group for the newspaper or the radio. Also, personalized emails go a long way. I don't know, the 130 odd people on here are all smart cookies. Don't do BCC. There's nothing that angers a reporter more than going out and just doing a BCC and hoping someone picks it up. For the extra hour it takes, or 2 hours, to create that rapport with that journalist, we always make an effort to personalize the journalist. Another tip to keep in mind is follow the journalists. I'll talk a little bit about this later. Follow them on social, follow them on Twitter. The journalists that I follow on Twitter are constantly looking for people to talk to. If you're not following the journalists in your community, you're doing yourself and your festival and event a disservice. You should be following them. You should be engaging with them. You should be looking at what they're talking about. You may have a different view. You may have a similar view, but that's a conversation that you should be having with them. So something quick on the media relations side, I'm always asked is it better to follow up by phone or email? To be honest with you, there is no silver bullet. Every journalist is the same. I've come to realize that. Every journalist wants to be spoken to differently and wants to be followed up differently. So keep that in mind. So in terms of who you should be talking to, I wanted to include this quickly, just as a quick see about. A lot of the times, if it's a festival and event, there are no dedicated festival and event reporters in Canada. If there is, prove me wrong. I'd like to know about it. But most of the times, you're going to be wanting to deal with the newsrooms, the news desks, the photo desks, and the editorial editors. These are the folks that you're going to be wanting to speak to on a regular basis to share who it is and what it is you do. For TV and radio, it's always the producer. I always start with the producer. That's where you'll have the greatest success in terms of pitching media. The producers at both TV and radio, they're the ones that make the decisions on what goes on the newscast and what doesn't go on the newscast. And then these are the assignment editors. I would encourage the folks that may not be so media relations savvy to actually print this off. Although I hate to kill trees, print this off and put it beside your desk. So when you're trying to figure out who it is you should be talking to, I think the biggest challenge, and I'm sure folks on this call are seeing it, is anytime you're pitching a story, inevitably somebody's saying, hey, you might want to talk to somebody in advertising, because sounds like more of an advertising play. And there will be times where it is an advertising play, and then maybe you need to pivot and figure out what story can I be telling and how am I not telling the story the right way, and figure out how to go at it. So again, just a quick overview of who you can be talking to in the media. The actual mechanics of media pitching, first and foremost, I touched on it earlier, have a current media list. There's nothing, for a lot of people, I know a lot of smaller festivals and events that have gone out and actually paid for a media list. I may be biased because I work in the industry, but I would invest in that, either in the time of getting it built or in the time of having one of your staff members go out and build that list for you. And again, I don't leave it just within your community. The travel media, the Jim Foxes of the world, there are three, if not four, national travel writers, Jim Fox, Jim Byers, and Patrick Brennan. I would take those names down: Patrick Brennan, Jim Fox, and Jim Byers, who are constantly talking about festivals and events that are happening across Ontario and across Canada. So get on their radar early. Now would be a good time just to at least introduce who you are. The reality is we don't even know if festivals and events are going to be taking place this spring and summer. That's actually one of my biggest fears. And I don't need to tell most of the folks on this call is that we're going to say, okay, things are going to start to open up for the festivals and events, and let's start looking at things in May and June. But the problem is, and I don't need to tell the people on this Zoom call, is how much organization goes into putting together a festival or event is that if you have something in July or August, it's going to be very hard if you're given a green light to do a smaller version in May. So it's so important to have those conversations with your media and keep at it. Again, I talked about it earlier. Draft a personalized email. Keep it short and direct with a clear ask. Ours are very simple. Hi, hope you're well. Thought I'd drop a line to see if you'd like to speak with X about Y, and go at it. When feasible, engage journalists on a one-on-one basis. They are looking for folks to talk to. And there are a lot of smart people in the festivals and events industry that can provide the commentary that they're looking for. So keep that in mind. Jay, sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, we have a question from Debbie asking if you can propose what companies would be good to contact that sell media lists.
Good question, Debbie. So there are a bunch that sell. You can reach out to a group like Cision. I don't know if anybody's heard of Cision. That's Cision, SCISION, Cision. And there's also groups like Meltwater, things of that nature. Those are two good ones. To be honest with you, Debbie, one of the best things to do that can be cost effective is to just actually work with either a staff member, allow them, especially if they're furloughed and at home right now. I was talking to a big event in Toronto the other day, and they were asking me, I've still got staff on payroll. Is any ideas on what we can be doing? I said, my gosh, yeah, like update your media list. Tell them to call the Toronto Star, the Globe, the CP24. Get the names and numbers of those people. It's golden. I think it can go a long way in terms of building your credibility. So yes, Debbie, there are one or two services called Cision or Meltwater that you can use to buy the media lists. But and also can be very beneficial to have somebody on your team actually go out and create those relationships. And what I tell clients in the festivals and events industry is, even though you're working with us and you have us on a retainer helping you out there tell your story, it's so important for the festival and event manager or owner of the event to make that relationship, to create that. So something very simple that you can do is jot down, it could be today, it could be tonight over a glass of wine, whatever you decide. Jot down what you feel comfortable speaking to the media about. I know the media are desperately trying to figure out and talk to people in the events industry. If you Google events industry, you'll see reporters saying, is there anybody in the events industry who can give me their thoughts on whether they think where things are headed this spring and summer? Jot down a list of what you feel comfortable talking about, and then reach out to the media. So, and it could be as simple as, hi, my name is Stephen Murdoch. I run such and such a festival. If you're looking to talk to somebody about where you think the show industry or festival and event industry is headed, if you're looking to talk about the economic impact, as you can imagine, that's a big conversation now for government. I know festivals and events are trying to figure out the economic impact alone of one show alone can be massive on some folks. And I know some events have been pivoting and selling merchandise, and I've heard a whole bunch of different stories, which I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A section. But figure out what you feel comfortable speaking to the media about, and then literally go to the media and present yourself as that expert. It's one thing. One thing we talk about is getting the media coverage. So I'm big on tracking the media coverage for a number of reasons. It's incredible how many festivals and events don't actually take full advantage of the media coverage. And what I say that is, we have some festivals and events who have very robust PR teams. So people like me that work inside, but are looking for another set of eyes for creativity, story angles. But it's leveraging that media coverage. When I started in PR going on 23 years ago, the great thing about getting an article about your festival event was bringing it down to the plaquing company, get it plaqued, hang it up on your wall, and then you hope when people came into your office, they get excited about it. But media coverage now can do so many things. And this is where another thing, if you're going to take anything away from it, is you should be sharing the media coverage as you get it on your website. You should be sharing your media coverage as you get it on your social media platforms. So, if you have a very robust following on Instagram or Twitter or on your Facebook group, you should be sharing that coverage. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Question from Jennifer from the city of Markham. She's a media relations specialist,
Yep.
has a background promoting festivals and films. She's curious about the balance between pitching up and coming influencers versus paying for established ones. Would you be able to speak about leveraging influencers on a budget?
Sure, that's a very good question. Jennifer, sorry, it was from Jennifer. So Jennifer, really good question. That's actually something that we do a lot of consumer products, as I said, the steam whistles and the Absolute vodkas and the Black & Deckers and Napoleon barbecues and Hisense TVs, and we deal a lot with influencers, as you can imagine. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of the top tier influencers, and the reason I say that is they're a lot, not so much about the long-term relationship. Most of them, it's about doing a one-off campaign with you, and then figuring out where the next big one-off campaign is. Not to say there aren't some out there. If you're not for profit, some of the big influencers are really good about wanting to help and do things with you. But if you're a municipality or you're a festival of an event, you just don't have the budgets. And there are a lot of up and coming, as I call them, second tier or B influencers who have legitimate followings. So the problem is, again, everybody on this Zoom call are smart cookies. The issue is I'm active on Twitter. I'm sorry, but if you have 25,000 followers or 30,000 followers and you're not getting one like, that's impossible. It's told me that you've bought your following. We actually invested in a tool that does just that. It'll go in and say this person has bought their followers from Bulgaria. This is your actual engagement. So if I'm a festival event, I want somebody who's got a decent following. The cutoff point I usually say is, anywhere 3,500, 4,000. And I look for engagement over followers. That's always been my play. Is I don't care if you have 25,000 followers, because the fact that you're not getting one like on your last 6 tweets tells me that two things: you either bought your following, which is most likely, or that you're not engaging with people. So there are programs that you can look into, Jennifer. Again, they can be cost prohibitive, but I would start to look at those second tier people. We do a lot of work with them. We send product. I'm not a big fan, full disclosure, not giving away state secrets. I'm not a big fan, for the most part, of paying influencers, especially at the beginning of a relationship, because it's a two-way street. And some influencers are right. They're very cognizant of who they work with and want to ensure that they're not killing their brand, and you want to make sure you're not killing your brand. So it does take a little bit of work, Jennifer. It's like building a media list. I don't need to tell you if you're a media relations expert, but I would really start to delve a little bit deeper and figure out who those B, I hate to use the term B, but those second influencers who just want product. We work with a lot of influencers, believe it or not, who will say, send me a case of wine, and we can do this, and we come up with a narrative together. We come up with the social content together. We have some on the festival event side. A lot of the time it's entry, right? It's entry and the VIP treatment for them and their friends, and then we have them share content throughout the year. But to be honest with you, Jennifer, it takes some serious time to figure out who those people are. I'm happy to share my email. I'll put my email address. Can I do that, Jay? Put it into the chat function?
Sure.
I'm going to put my email in the chat function now for people, for like Jennifer or anybody else. Feel free to reach out to me and ask questions specifically about that. I forgot the com. And I'm happy to answer that. In terms of your questions, you can also, I'll put my Twitter handle on there. You can reach out to me on Twitter. Good. Sorry, Jay.
I think you're missing the M too. You have S. Murdoch.
Oh, sorry, my friend. That would help, eh?
That would help. We had a question from Patricia just asking, how do you find the second tier influencers?
Well, research. I mean, two ways. There's tools out there that unfortunately cost money. There are some groups that'll reach out to us, festivals and events and consumer brands, and as part and parcel of working with an agency like ours, we share them. Right? We spend a lot of money on these. They're not cheap. I'd be lying to you. Tens of thousands of dollars for some of these services. And I can do something as simple as say, I'm a festival in Markham. I'm a festival in Cambridge. Tell me who would be the influencers in my area who would cover an event or festival or something of that nature that I would do. So keep that in mind. But honestly, it's research. If you Google's a wonderful tool. Not trying to be funny, but it is really a wonderful tool in terms of getting out there and figuring out who in your community can speak to it. But there are people. You know what? And full disclosure, it's a very good question. You know what I do when I'm stuck? I go to the young people in our office. I'm 46 soon. I'm 46 in 2 weeks. So I'm probably not the best when it comes to that. So I'll go to the young people in our office, the 21, 22-year-olds, and I'll say, hey, who's on YouTube? Who's up and coming? And to be honest with you, talk to your younger staff, talk to your nieces, your nephews. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
It's okay. No, I'm just waiting for an opportunity. Peter McCluskey from the Toronto Garlic Festival is asking a question. I think you kind of answered it already, but suggestions on the mechanics of creating a media list. How do you get those email addresses, telephone numbers, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. Good question, Peter. At Garlic Festival, that's awesome. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that offline, Peter. Very good question, Peter. To be honest with you, it's getting on the horn. We all hate getting on the phone. A lot of the times getting on the horn and just calling the reporter. Again, Google, if you're a lifestyle show, lifestyle editor, lifestyle reporter, Toronto, lifestyle editor, Toronto, you'll find it. Twitter is a magnificent tool because a lot of the journalists will actually have their email. A lot of the Toronto Star journalists, for example, have their email in their Twitter bio at the top of their handle. But a lot of it, to be honest with you, just comes down to, it really just comes down to you picking up the phone and saying, hi, I'm Peter from the Garlic Festival. You know, I want to make relationships with the lifestyle media, the business media. Can you share the email and phone number? And then what I would do is create an Excel document and just continue to add on it. And then when your show moves to the next year, 3 months, 4 months out of the festival, you should be having somebody on your team or hire a student, as I talked about earlier, to reach out to these outlets and say, you know, is so-and-so, is Mike Eppel still with 680 News? No, Mike left on, unfortunately, let's say. So who's replacing Mike? So you have to, having that media list, it's golden, but honestly, it takes such a large amount of times to go at it. We tell our clients, a lot of our clients will ask us very upfront, they'll say, can you share your media list? And I don't like sharing media lists, to be honest with you. The reality is we don't hide stuff from our clients. They can see who the reporter is and they can see the contact information. I think the media list is important and there's intrinsic value in it, to be honest with you. If you're something I've also heard of is festivals and events that are in the same community that are not competing. They put money in together. I've heard festivals and events in smaller communities who said, let's each throw $500 in and buy the media list and then share that media list. So that's something you might want to do too, is conquer and attack and share. So I don't know if that helps, Peter, but if you want, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
I'm going to ask a question from me, if that's all right.
Please go ahead.
So when I was in radio for many years ago, the mandate was for radio stations to get more involved in their community.
Yes.
So much so that they were actually competing against each other to get the title sponsorship of a lot of these local events.
Yes.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about not so much just coverage, but partnerships with media, working with them, you know, working with a fair, for example, sure, to get ride tickets and prizes in exchange for on-air promotion in local radio stations and things like of that nature.
Sounds good. Happy to. And Deshaun, I'll answer your question. I see you had a question too, Deshaun, so I'll answer that right after Jay. Interesting question. Full disclosure, most of our clients, you can probably find that out, have a relationship with the Toronto Star. I think they find that the Toronto Star, this is specific to Toronto, they find that there's value in the Toronto Star. The issue with that can be, if you're pitching a story to the Toronto Sun, there's less likelihood they're going to pick up the story. So again, I've been at this for a long time and I've gotten to know the reporters on a personal, and I'm blessed and fortunate to have good relationships with most of them. And they'll be very forthcoming and say, you know, Stephen, your festival or event has a relationship with the Toronto Star. Why would we want to cover this? They didn't do any form of buy with us. So it can honestly be a double-edged sword at the end of the day. I've found in Toronto, the Toronto Star does have, if you're a Toronto event, does obviously have a big following and are really good about amplifying it. I think you need to figure out, let's be honest with each other. It all starts with budget. What's your budget? And then honestly, budget a lot of the time will dictate what you can do. I see real value in all of it. I was reading a piece the other day that said media, there's more eyes on TV. We're not surprised by that. But people are watching news more. People are consuming news at an all-time high rate. I love talk radio. My local station is 610 CKTV. I love listening to talk radio. So every audience, but it really goes back, honestly, to answer your question, Jay, is speak to your, I get that all the time. They're like, okay, let's say we have a budget of 50,000. Who should be our title sponsor? Which radio station, which TV station, and which paper? Well, first off, with a budget like that, you're probably not going to be able to work with all three. But it all starts with figuring out who your audience is. If I was a festival event right now, there's a ton of stuff you can be doing. Just even quick, we're working with a tourism group out in British Columbia right now. And wonderful group, wonderful people, and they're very smart. They're asking questions of their audience now for a number of reasons, to figure out who their audience is and to figure out how they should communicate with them. So if you haven't done that, if you've got a following, I would put a quick poll up and say, hey, how are you folks? How are you learning information, or how do you consume information on a festival or event? Do you go to the newspaper? Do you go online? Do you go to the radio or TV? And to be honest with you, listen to the people that are attending your event, and that'll help you figure out who you should be doing work with. Does that help, Jay? Sorry, does that help, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just you can usually get more coverage from a media establishment if they're also invested as a sponsor, is if they're putting their name behind an event. 100%. You can not only get the commercials you buy, but you can get extra airtime through promotions and giveaways and things like that.
I can tell you with Canada Blooms, they've had a long-standing relationship with the Toronto Star, and the Toronto Star has been really great about sending a reporter every day, pretty much, right? Just to come down quickly, see what's happening on the show floor. So yeah, it's just figuring that out. Deshaun, sorry, you had a question. Were there two questions here, Deshaun? I saw, how important is timing with securing PR placement? Timing is extreme. That's a good question, Deshaun. Timing is very important. I think where most festivals and events miss the opportunity is not talking to their community throughout the year. Right? Is every month, there's no reason. If you're a festival or an event in July or August, there's absolutely no reason you can't be talking to the media about something, whether it's the challenges of running a festival of event, where you see events headed post-pandemic. Believe it or not, it's like I like to consider myself, I hate using the word experts, but I've been at this 23 years. You guys are the festivals and events experts. I'm not. The journalists are not. People always say, I work with 7 former journalists, and people say, man, they're smart people. And I said, there are, but they only know a little bit about everything. And where you come is you're the expert, right? And I think sometimes people forget that. And there's a level of fear of speaking to the media. And there shouldn't be that fear, because they know more than they do. So yes, timing is important. I like to pitch media. Now I'm giving away a state secret. I like to pitch media Tuesday to Thursday. Media are a lot like us on Mondays. They come into a ton of media releases, media pitches. I spoke with one journalist who gets about 1,000 media pitches a day. Can you imagine getting 1,000 press releases from internal comms departments, agencies like ours? I've found great success pitching media Tuesday to Thursday. And I'm an early riser. I like to get pitches in their email box by 7:30 in the morning, because a lot of those, even though we're on Zoom, a lot of these people are having editorial meetings on Zoom and figuring out what they want to talk about today. So Deshaun, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm happy to talk about that offline if that helps you. So we're coming to the end here. I know, Debbie, so I'll just leave it with this. Just, if you're going to, some quick tips. I talked about this. Make sure the media list, go at it. Research recent coverage of journalists, please. It always helps. If we're doing work with Steam Whistle, I'll go out of my way to look at reporters who are talking about the Canadian beer industry and reach out to them, say, hey, saw your piece 3 weeks ago about the Canadian beer industry. Do you want to talk about Do you want to talk to Steam Whistle? They can provide some color. We've had really good success on weekend pitching. Believe it or not, the news cycle doesn't stop. So keep that in mind. And we talked about that, packaging the story all up, photos, video, social content. There's greater likelihood it's going to get picked up. Again, just some quick icons. Build relationships, not individual opportunities. When you're working with the media in your community or media in Toronto or wherever, it's all about relationships. It's like anything in life with your partner or anything else I talk about. I'm a big relationship person. I will never screw over the member of the media. They're important allies in helping to tell clients' stories. I'm make every effort to anticipate the needs of media. I know right now, for example, we're doing work with Massimo Capra and Mohammed Fakai, and I know, and they have a pizza restaurant in Toronto. So I know Pizza Day, National Pizza Day, for those that want to know, is next week. So I'm offering them up. I'm hoping I'm doing a journalist a favor and saying, hey, I've got two individuals, Massimo, Mohammed, who can speak about making pizzas and tips for making pizzas. Let the media get to know you. Super important. You do that, you will have a friend for life. Keep your promises. Just like anything else in life, don't disappoint the media. You disappoint the media, and they won't come back to you. It's just it's as simple as that. And my last slide, I'll leave it at this. I want to write a book on this. I called it the 3 C's. Good media relations comes down to the 3 C's: creativity, content, and connections. If you're going to take something away from this, come up with really good story angles. That's where the creativity is. Create really good content so that a journalist on the other side can literally cut and paste your story, or if it's an online portal, and then have those connections. Know the people in the newsroom, create relationships with them, care about them, and thank them for the coverage when you get it. And that's it for me, my friend. I think we ended right at time, 11:45. So we've got 15 minutes for questions if anybody has any.
I do. I have a question.
Please.
So you keep talking about building a relationship with the journalists.
Yeah.
Because everything is technology today, emails, Twitter,
yeah.
Text messaging. What's the best way? Because I am a relationship person too, and I like talking to people. Because I sometimes find it gets lost in translation. Yeah. So how do you? I know the 3 C's are there, but how do you build that relationship, especially if you're new or there's somebody new coming into a new radio station or paper?
That's a really good question. Actually, you are a mind reader, Debbie, because we just had an internal conversation about this, because we continue to build our team, and the younger people are it drives them crazy, because they said, for an example, we'll have a young staff member send out a media release to somebody, and they say never heard back from the outlet, and I said, okay, send me the media pitch, and then I'll send it, and within 5 minutes they're like, hey, can we get that on? And they're like, what? It's the same pitch. I said, it's a relationship, right? Sometimes we have clients who hire us, they create the content. And to be honest with you, a lot of the times we're moving it around. How do you do that? By picking up the phone, by following quick tips. Follow the journalists in your community on Twitter, engage with them. When they write a good piece, tell them. Most journalists aren't paid well, right? They're for the amount of work that they do, they want a level of appreciation in their community. So keep that in mind. Thank them for a well-written article. Thank them for being a voice of your community. Pick up the phone. We're all busy, but I'll tell you, journalists are really good at wanting to understand who you are, especially if you're in their community. And sometimes when I always say, invite them for a coffee. You'd be surprised some of the journalists in the communities. We're not talking the big Toronto papers and that, but if you're a community editor or in some of the smaller communities and like a KW paper or something like that, if you were to reach out to the editor post-pandemic and say, I want to sit down and have a coffee with you to understand, what is it you're looking for in terms of editorial? There's all different ways. So yeah, it just honestly, it comes with time, to be honest with you, Debbie.
And you got to you've got to reach out too. You can't depend on them to get back to you, like you said, right? It's doing the follow-up, and I like picking up the phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do I. It is. As I said, I'm aging myself, but I don't mind it, right? Especially when you're starting. Now, I never pick up the phone. I mean, again, I've been at this so long. I can send a quick note to a journalist, and it's like, hey, hope today's going well. I think this will be of interest, and you have that relationship that's been built over years of trust. That they know you're not going to pitch them a crappy story, and they know that you're going to make yourself available. So it's all stuff to keep in mind. And Donna, I saw your question. Is it effective? Yeah, you could. I follow some journalists. There's sometimes, to be honest with you, there are journalists who write articles who have nothing to do with my clients, nothing, and I'll tweet back at them and say that was a really good piece, right? And it's that level of appreciation, just saying, hey, I appreciate it. That goes a long way. Even radio, Jay will tell you from his days of the radio. There's been oftentimes a lot of media, we follow each other on Twitter, and I'll message them off Twitter and say, hey, great show today. Your morning show is really good. I'm glad what you did. And it goes a long way. I would tag media. This is something that a lot of festivals and events don't do, that I would do, is when you get the media coverage, thank the reporter. I think if you were to take a reporter aside and go to a pub with them and say, hey, did you cover that festival or event in your community? Yep. And how was it? Great. Reader reaction was fine, listener reaction was fine, but I didn't even get a thank you. And it's a frustration, right? They don't have to cover your story, right? But this is what media relations is this belief. Well, why aren't you covering my story? I don't have to cover your story, right? There's a million wonderful things happening in the community. So keep that in mind. Thank them for the coverage and tag them, Donna. I would on Twitter. I always tell clients, if you got a really well-written piece, tag the reporter and tag the media outlet.
So how do you, well, I think I know the answer to this, but how would you track who has written about your festival or whatever it is? How do you track that?
Well, there's Google, and Google News is
okay.
great, but there are things that slip through Google News, to be honest with you, and you have to use media tracking services. There's a ton of media tracking services out there that you can use, so keep that in mind. There are constantly, you can say, give them terms like, Peter, I'm going to pick on your Garlic Festival if you're still here, but you can say Garlic Festival Toronto, and something with those kind of word terms are most likely only going to get any mentions of you. I'll tell you, if you don't think the media coverage is important, I always say to folks, at the end, when we're done all our work for clients, we always put together a media coverage report for a number of reasons. Exhibitors wants to see it, sponsors want to see it, and it makes it easier next year. So I can tell you, with a big show like Canada Blooms or Auto Show, we spend hours and days putting together the media coverage, analyzing the media coverage, who's talking about the festival, what they're saying about the festival, and then taking that and sharing it with your sponsors, sharing it with your exhibitors. That's it. Does that help?
Perfect. Yep. Yep.
Good. Is there any other questions?
Dave has one. If you want coverage on the site, don't give away everything in the press release. If they have all the details, why come? Create a visual for the media, not just a talking head.
No, yeah, I'd say that's a good point, Dave. You want to give them enough. You want to give them enough to. I think you want to give them enough to want to get them there. But you don't want to give away the house by no means. You're 100% right.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned some people, Jim Fox, Jim Byers. Who is the other one?
Jim Fox, Jim Byers, and Patrick Brennan, three wonderful gentlemen. They are three travel writers, but they touch a lot on events and festivals. I would, if you're not following the three of them, you should on Twitter. I say that actually. I think only one of the three. Jim Byers is extremely active on Twitter, but I would Google them. You'll find their email addresses. Drop and mention my name. Say I was on a talk with Stephen, and he mentioned, it'd be good for you to for me to talk to you and kind of get a sense of who we are and the stories that we have to tell.
I don't know. I just have another question, because you talked a lot about influencers.
Sure.
How, if you have a festival that has a big following, would you consider yourself an influencer?
Yeah, I certainly. I think festivals and events, if there's, they can certainly share. I've been hearing stories of festivals and events who've been pivoting because they have such big followings on their social media platforms and have literally started selling items. like shirts, like, you know, hope we didn't get to see you this year. We might not get to see you this year, but yeah, you can certainly become an influencer yourself, right? It's always nice to have a face to the festival or events. You know, there's some good ones here in Niagara where they do a really good job of, there's faces and they're well known in the community and they're actively talking. I can tell you where I live in St. Catharines, I was on this morning on 610 CKTV. They have something called the Roundtable where they bring people in from the community, and it does nothing for my public relations business, but it does help with building brand. And so look for those opportunities in your community. If they have a local radio station, offer yourself up to go on the morning roundtable. And a lot of your communities I know have these, and just say, you know, I'm happy to come on and talk about the news of the day. And I would also say, and we never talked about this, media training. If you have an opportunity to get media trained, do it. It's something our firm does. We do a lot of it. We've done it for prime ministers. We've done it for premiers. We've done it for CEOs of companies. It is so important. There's such a high comfort level. I think personally, it's a wonderful investment. You can do a half-day session, and the comfort level, it just makes it that much easier.
I was going to ask about that. How, you know, are there do's and don'ts in the whole, when you're talking to a journalist, because you said talk to them, but are there do's and don'ts of things you say or don't say?
No, because to be honest with you, the greatest takeaway is nothing's off the record. If you believe that, I've seen too many people burned, right? Where they said, oh, you know, we ended up having a pint, because at the end of the day, people are breaking news, right? So, you know, if you're out there and you're having on your second pint with a reporter in your community, and, you know, you're talking, you're like, hey, it's a struggle, you know, we may not be here next year. Next thing you know, you're finishing up your pints, you're home, and then you see a tweet that says, and I've seen it, tweet that says, you know, so-and-so festival might not be around next year. It's like, oh my gosh. So, you know, keep that, nothing's off the record. It doesn't matter who the member of the media is. So keep that in mind.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. And sorry, Wanda, I saw that. That's good. I'm glad to hear, Wanda, that they covered this story as they should. So I would, I'm sure, Wanda, you folks are in planning mode for next year.
Does anybody else have any other questions? We've got 4 minutes left. Stephen, anything you want to close with?
No, just thank you. You know, it's easy for me to say, but keep your heads up. And I consider myself a pretty positive person. And, you know, kudos to the people at Debbie and Jay and the festivals and events group. I think it's so important. And I wasn't paid for this, by the way, but it's so important, the role that these people play. I think they're such strong advocates for the industry. And, you know, keep your head up. I know it's so, I've been on calls at 11 o'clock at night with people that run shows, and they're you know, they're hurting. And I see it. We see it. It's impacted all of us. It's impacted all of us either physically, mentally, or financially. For some of us, it's impacted us 2 or 3 ways. So keep that in mind. Keep your heads up. We are going to get out of this, and there will be some level of normalcy. I wish I could give you a definitive answer as to when that is, but you know, just keep at it. Keep at it and trust that better days are ahead. So I appreciate you folks taking time out of your busy schedule. And honestly, don't hesitate to email me after this, and I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call, preferably over a pint or a glass of wine at 4. And my best ideas come in the afternoon. And I'm happy to have a discussion and provide some pro bono help and some context if that helps you.
That's great, Stephen. Thanks a lot. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. A great session, lots of great information, Stephen. And just a quick reminder for everyone that at noon tomorrow, we have Mike Durzo from Mega Magic. I usually call him Magic Mike, but it's actually Mega Magic with a virtual magic show. So that'll be at noon tomorrow. And on Thursday, we have 3 panel sessions starting at 9, post-pandemic festival and event trends, working with your municipal partners and hyper-local experience. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Ticket Pro, Smart Serve, Event Hub, Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture, OLG, and Destination Ontario. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Jay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.